great persecution begins in the Roman Empire. On 24th February 303, Emperor Diocletian issued the first of a series of edicts targeting Christians across the Roman Empire. Churches were ordered destroyed, scriptures confiscated, and Christian officials stripped of rank unless they performed traditional Roman sacrifices. This marked the beginning of what later historians would call the Great Persecution. Enforcement was especially severe in the eastern provinces, where imperial authority was strongest. The aim was to restore unity through traditional religion at a time of political strain. Instead, the persecution hardened Christian identity and created martyrs whose stories circulated widely. Within a generation, Christianity would not only survive, but gain imperial backing under Constantine. In the long term, this attempt to suppress the faith became one of the final efforts to preserve pagan Rome before its religious transformation. Number 9. Valentinian first proclaimed Roman emperor. Following the sudden death of Emperor Jovian, Roman troops in Pannonia proclaimed the experienced general Valentinian I as emperor. His elevation by the army reflected the growing instability of imperial succession in the 4th century. Valentinian quickly reassured his soldiers that military strength would remain his priority. Soon after, he appointed his brother Valens to rule the eastern provinces, effectively reinforcing the division of the empire. This arrangement temporarily stabilized frontier defenses along the Rhine and Danube. However, it also reinforced the habit of splitting authority between East and West. Over time, such divisions hardened into permanent separation. Valentinian I's proclamation therefore mattered not just as a change of ruler, but as another step toward the structural fragmentation of the late Roman world. Number 8. Establishment of the Roman Tetrarchy. On 1st March 1993, Diocletian formalized a new system of rule known as the Tetrarchy. 2 senior emperors, called Augusti, would govern alongside 2 junior Caesars. Constantius Chlorus was appointed as Caesar in the West, creating a power-sharing arrangement intended to prevent civil war. The empire was now administratively divided into eastern and western regions, each with its own leadership. This system aimed to secure frontiers and ensure orderly succession. For a time, it reduced internal conflict and strengthened military response. Yet it also institutionalized regional separation. In the long term, the Tetrarchy laid the groundwork for the enduring division between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. Its legacy would shape the medieval Byzantine state and the eventual fall of the West. Number 7. Hadrian adopts Antoninus Pius as heir. On 25th February 38, Emperor Hadrian formally adopted Antoninus Pius as his successor. Adoption had become a political tool for ensuring stable succession rather than relying solely on bloodline inheritance. Antoninus was already an experienced administrator and respected senator. By choosing him, Hadrian aimed to prevent the kind of military unrest that often followed imperial deaths. The decision secured a smooth transition when Hadrian died later that year. Antoninus Pius would go on to rule during a relatively peaceful and prosperous period. He, in turn, adopted Marcus Aurelius, extending this line of stable governance. Although earlier than the traditional Dark Age period, this moment of managed succession stands in contrast to later centuries of instability. It illustrates how fragile continuity could become when such systems broke down. Number 6. The tripartite inventure and divisions of power in Britain. On 28th February 1405, during the Welsh uprising led by Owain Glenmur, a remarkable agreement known as the tripartite inventure was signed. Glenmur, Edmund Mortimer, and Henry Percy planned to divide England and Wales among themselves. The agreement reflected deep dissatisfaction with King Henry IV's rule. Wales would become an independent principality under Glyndwr, while England would be partitioned between the other conspirators. Although ambitious, the plan never came to fruition. Internal defeats and shifting alliances weakened the rebellion, yet the very existence of such a document reveals how fragile royal authority could be in medieval Britain. It demonstrated that powerful nobles were willing to redraw political boundaries entirely, In the longer term, it highlighted the constant tension between central monarchy and regional power. Number 5. Death of Charles III of Naples and accession of Ladislaus. On 24th February 1386, King Charles III of Naples died after being fatally wounded in Hungary. His death triggered immediate succession by his young son Ladislaus. The new king was only a child, leaving governance in the hands of regents. Rival claimants from the Angevin line contested the Neapolitan throne. Southern Italy entered a prolonged period of dynastic conflict. These disputes drew in wider European powers, including France and Hungary. Ladislaus eventually secured his position, but only after years of instability. The event illustrates how the sudden death of a ruler could destabilize an entire region. In the broader medieval context, such succession crises repeatedly reshaped alliances and borders. Number 4. Columbus uses a lunar eclipse in Jamaica. On 29th February 54, stranded in Jamaica during his fourth voyage, Christopher Columbus faced dwindling supplies and strained relations with local communities. Consulting astronomical tables, he knew a total lunar eclipse would occur on this night. He warned local leaders that his god would darken the moon in anger if they refused to provide aid. When the eclipse began, fear spread among the islanders. Columbus then claimed he would restore the moon if cooperation resumed. As the eclipse ended naturally, his authority appeared vindicated. This episode demonstrates the practical application of medieval astronomical knowledge. It also reflects the imbalance of information between European explorers and indigenous populations. In the long term, such encounters shaped patterns of conquest and colonization across the Atlantic world. Number 3. Reconstruction of Hagia Sophia ordered by Justinian I. On 23rd February 532, after the devastating Nika riots earlier that year, Emperor Justinian ordered the construction of a new and grander Hagia Sophia. The previous church had been destroyed during the unrest. Justinian commissioned architects Anthemius and Isidore to design a structure unlike any before it. The rebuilding symbolized imperial resilience after near overthrow. The new Hagia Sophia would become one of the greatest architectural achievements of the medieval world. It stood as the religious heart of the Byzantine Empire for centuries. Beyond architecture, it represented the fusion of imperial authority and Christian faith. Its influence extended across Orthodox Christianity and later into Ottoman history. Number 2. The Edict of Thessalonica. On 27th of February 380, Emperor Theodosius I issued a decree that would redefine the religious identity of the Roman Empire. The Edict of Thessalonica declared Nicene Christianity to be the official state faith. Alternative Christian doctrines and traditional pagan practices were increasingly marginalized. The decree aligned imperial authority with the bishops of Rome and Alexandria. In practical terms, it strengthened the institutional church. Over time, it reshaped law, culture, and education throughout Europe. The Roman state now formally supported a single orthodox belief system. This marked the end of religious pluralism within imperial governance. The consequences would echo throughout the medieval period. Number 1. Christianity becomes the Roman Empire's official religion. On 27th February 380, the same decree issued by Theodosius I officially made Nicene Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. This monumental shift in religious policy reshaped European history for centuries. Imperial power was now explicitly tied to Christian doctrine. This shift influenced everything from political legitimacy to artistic expression. Pagan temples gradually declined, while churches expanded in influence. Bishops became central figures in civic administration. Medieval Europe would inherit this union of church and state authority. The transformation begun on 27th February 380 shaped law, kingship, and identity for over a millennium. Few weeks in history contain a moment of such lasting consequence. Number 10. Was the poll tax really the cause? In 1380, the Crown introduced a new poll tax requiring every adult to pay the same fixed amount, regardless of wealth. It was the third such tax in just a few years, and this time enforcement was aggressive. Royal officials entered villages in Essex and Kent, questioning households and demanding full payment. Resistance flared quickly. On the surface, the tax appears to have sparked the revolt. Yet England had faced heavy taxation before without this level of coordinated violence. If the poll tax was only a spark, then something far more combustible had been building beneath the surface of English society. After the Black Death, labour shortages had shifted the balance between workers and landowners. Laws attempted to freeze wages and restrict movement. Corruption and resentment simmered. The deeper anger may have been forming for decades, waiting for the right moment to ignite. Number 9. How organised were the rebels? The speed of the uprising was remarkable. Within days, unrest in Essex and Kent turned into organised marches toward London. Groups from different counties moved with apparent shared purpose. Some sources suggest letters were sent between villages encouraging resistance. If that is true, this was not spontaneous chaos, it was coordination. Medieval chroniclers often describe the rebels as unruly mobs, driven by impulse rather than planning. Yet the timing, direction, and selection of targets suggest at least some level of structure. Officials were hunted deliberately, records were targeted precisely. Was this a movement quietly prepared in advance, or did events accelerate so quickly that they only appeared organized in hindsight? The answer changes how we understand the revolt entirely. Number 8. What did John Ball actually preach? Among the most famous figures of the revolt was John Ball, a radical preacher who had long criticized inequality. He is remembered for the line, "When Adam delved and Eve span, who was then the gentleman?" The phrase challenges inherited privilege and suggests a world where social divisions were neither natural nor inevitable. But we do not possess Ball's own writings. What survives comes from chroniclers such as Froissart and the monk Walsingham, both hostile to the rebels. That means the words we attribute to Ball may have passed through the pens of his enemies. Was he calling for modest reform? Or something closer to social revolution? The John Ball we think we know may be partly a creation of those who feared him. Number 7. Why did London open its gates? When the rebels reached London, the city did not repel them. The gates were open, crowds entered with limited resistance. This remains one of the great puzzles of the revolt. London was wealthy and fortified. It could have attempted to hold out, yet divisions ran through the city's leadership. Some guild members and poorer citizens may have sympathized with the rebels' grievances. Others may simply have feared that resistance would bring greater violence. It is possible that elements within London quietly supported the uprising. Whether through sympathy, fear, or confusion, the decision to open the gates transformed a regional revolt into a national crisis. Number 6. The destruction of records, what was erased? Once inside London and other towns, the rebels did not act randomly. They targeted specific buildings and, most strikingly, records. Legal rolls, tax registers, and manorial documents were dragged out and burned. These papers recorded debts, labour services, and the legal bonds of serfdom. Destroying them was both symbolic and practical. If the documents vanished, proof of obligation might vanish with them. They were not only attacking men, they were attacking memory. This suggests the rebels understood the machinery of power. Authority did not rest only in castles and armour, but in ink, parchment, and sealed agreements. In many ways, this was an assault on bureaucracy itself. Number 5. What really happened at Mile End? On the 14th of June, 1381, the 14-year-old King Richard II met the rebels at Mile End. According to some accounts, he agreed to sweeping concessions. charters were reportedly issued promising freedom from serfdom and fairer rents. But the chronicles do not fully agree on what was said or how sincere those promises were. Was the king genuinely conceding reform under pressure? Or was he buying time in a dangerous situation? The atmosphere was volatile. Royal authority was fragile. Within days, those promises would be revoked. Whether Mile End was a moment of genuine reform or calculated delay remains uncertain. Number 4. Was Wat Tyler assassinated or provoked? Wat Tyler emerged as one of the revolt's central leaders. On the 15th of June, 1381, he met the king again at Smithfield. During the meeting, an argument broke out between Tyler and William Walworth, the Mayor of London. Accounts differ sharply. Some claim Tyler behaved aggressively and was struck in self-defense. Others suggest he was deliberately cut down to decapitate the movement. He was mortally wounded and later executed. If Tyler was eliminated intentionally, it would suggest a calculated move to end negotiations by removing the rebels' figurehead. Within hours of his death, the balance of power shifted. Number 3. Did the revolt nearly overthrow the government? For a brief moment, royal authority appeared dangerously exposed. Archbishop Simon Sudbury and Treasurer Robert Hales were captured and executed. The Tower of London was entered. Government officials were hunted down. The capital was not firmly under control. England had a teenage king and divided elites. If communication had broken down further, or if the rebels had consolidated their position, the consequences might have been far more severe. Was the government truly on the brink of collapse, or did it only feel that way in the chaos of the moment? The line between crisis and overthrow may have been thinner than later chroniclers wished to admit. Number 2. Why did the revolt collapse so quickly? After Wat Tyler's death, King Richard rode toward the gathered rebels and addressed them directly. He reportedly declared, "I am your captain." It was a bold move. With their leader gone, many rebels hesitated. Some dispersed. Royal forces regrouped. Promises were withdrawn. Arrests and executions followed. The speed of the collapse is striking. Did the movement depend too heavily on a few visible leaders, or did fear simply return once the shock of revolt faded? Momentum had carried the uprising forward. Leadership and resolve had held it together. Once those fractured, the structure collapsed rapidly. Number 1. Did the revolt actually change England? In the immediate aftermath, the revolt appeared to fail. Harsh reprisals were carried out. Leaders were executed. Officially, serfdom remained. Yet over the following decades, unfree labour declined across much of England. Economic realities after the Black Death made strict enforcement increasingly difficult. Landowners adapted. Labour mobility expanded. Historians still debate how much the revolt accelerated this transformation. Did it directly force change, or did it merely reveal deeper structural shifts already underway? The answer may lie somewhere between cause and consequence. Even in defeat, the revolt left a mark on the political imagination of England. It showed that authority could be challenged and that even a king could be forced to negotiate. Number 10. The fall of Roman Britain. In 410 AD, Roman authority in Britain effectively ended as imperial administration withdrew and the legions were recalled. Town councils lost funding, frontier defences were abandoned, and once busy trade networks began to decay. Without the structure of Roman governance, local leaders struggled to maintain order. Coinage disappeared from circulation, and urban life slowly contracted into smaller fortified settlements. Anglo-Saxon migrations increased during the 5th century, reshaping the political and cultural landscape. Communities that had relied on Roman roads and markets now faced isolation and insecurity. Over time, Britain fragmented into competing kingdoms, marking the beginning of a new and uncertain era. Number 9. The final destruction of Alexandria's classical learning. By the 6th century, the intellectual legacy of ancient Alexandria was already fading. the Serapeum, which had housed part of the Great Library's collection, had been destroyed in 391 AD amid religious conflict. In 415 AD, the philosopher Hypatia was murdered, symbolizing the end of the city's classical scholarly tradition. Over the following centuries, remaining schools and manuscript collections dwindled. When Arab forces captured Alexandria in 642 AD, the city had long ceased to be the beacon of learning it once was. Later legends spoke of libraries burned, though modern historians debate those accounts. What is certain is that by the early medieval period, much of the classical world's accumulated knowledge had vanished or dispersed. The loss represented not a single moment of fire, but centuries of erosion and upheaval. Number 8. The Plague of Justinian. In 541 AD, a devastating plague began spreading through the Eastern Roman Empire. It reached Constantinople in 542 AD, where contemporary writers describe streets filled with the dead. At the height of the outbreak, thousands were said to die each day. Trade slowed dramatically as ports closed and fear spread faster than official responses. Farms were abandoned and tax revenues collapsed. The disease moved along shipping routes across the Mediterranean, affecting cities, villages, and military garrisons alike. Although exact mortality figures remain debated, the demographic shock was immense. The empire survived, but its capacity to wage war and sustain ambitious projects was permanently weakened. Number 7. The climate catastrophe of 536 AD. In 536 AD, observers across Europe and the Mediterranean recorded darkened skies and unusually cold weather. Modern scientific evidence suggests a major volcanic eruption filled the atmosphere with dust, reducing sunlight for months or even years. Crops failed across wide regions, and famine followed. Contemporary writers noted that the sun appeared dim, as though in constant eclipse. Livestock died, and grain shortages drove up prices. In already fragile kingdoms, hunger intensified social strain. The cooling period lasted long enough to deepen instability across multiple regions. For many communities, the catastrophe felt like an omen of a world losing its balance. Number 6. The early medieval North Sea storm surges. Between the 7th century and the 9th century, coastal settlements along the North Sea faced repeated flooding disasters. Low-lying lands in what is now the Netherlands and northern Germany were especially vulnerable. In 838 AD, a major storm surge inundated large areas, reportedly drowning thousands. Wooden homes and simple earthwork defenses offered little protection against the sea. Fields were turned into salt marshes, ruining harvests for years. Entire communities were forced to relocate to higher ground. Each flood erased years of labor and fragile prosperity. In regions already exposed to political uncertainty, the sea itself became another relentless enemy. Number 5. The collapse of the Avar Khaganate. For centuries, the Avars dominated large parts of Central Europe, ruling from fortified ring-shaped strongholds. By the late 8th century, however, their power began to crumble. Frankish campaigns under Charlemagne targeted Avar fortresses and seized their accumulated wealth. In 796 AD, the Avar leadership submitted to Frankish authority. Internal divisions and external pressures accelerated their decline. Without a strong central structure, the Khaganate fragmented. Archaeological remains show abandoned fortifications and disrupted settlement patterns. Within a few decades, a once feared power had largely disappeared, leaving behind a vacuum that reshaped the political map of the region. Number 4. The sudden fall of the Visigothic kingdom. In 711 AD, a relatively small invading force crossed into Iberia and confronted the Visigothic king Roderick. At the Battle of Guadalete, the Visigothic army was defeated and Roderick was killed. With the monarchy shattered, resistance collapsed quickly. Within a few years, most of the peninsula was under new rule. The transition was swift and transformative. Long-standing political structures vanished almost overnight. Religious, legal, and cultural systems were reshaped under Umayyad governance. For the people of Iberia, the change was abrupt, marking one of the most dramatic collapses of the early medieval period. Number 3. The earthquake that destroyed Antioch. In May 526 AD, a powerful earthquake struck the city of Antioch, one of the Eastern Roman Empire's major urban centers. The tremor occurred during the morning hours when streets and churches were full. Buildings collapsed instantly, trapping thousands beneath stone and timber. Contemporary sources suggest that as many as 250,000 people may have died, though exact numbers are uncertain. Fires broke out in the aftermath and burned for days, compounding the destruction. Survivors fled a city reduced to rubble. Antioch had been a vital administrative and commercial hub. Its devastation weakened imperial authority in the region at a critical moment. Number 2. The Great Flood in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. In 740, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded a vast sea flood that overwhelmed large parts of England's coast. The chronicler described waters rising higher than anyone could remember. Towns were inundated and countless lives were reportedly lost. Ships were driven far inland and bridges were destroyed. Crops were ruined in a kingdom already strained by Danish invasions and political instability. The disaster deepened hardship at a moment when unity was fragile. Flooding of this scale could undo years of recovery. In a land already facing war and succession crises, nature delivered another severe blow. Number 1. The recurring waves of the Justinianic plague. The plague that began in 541 AD did not disappear after a single outbreak. Repeated waves returned throughout the 6th century and into the 7th century. Each resurgence disrupted recovery just as populations began to stabilize. Cities struggled to rebuild their labor forces. Rural communities lost generations of farmers and artisans. Military recruitment became more difficult, limiting imperial ambitions. The psychological weight of recurring disease shaped how people understood their world. Even when the worst outbreaks subsided, the memory of sudden death remained close. Over decades, these repeated shocks drained strength from the Eastern Roman Empire and altered the trajectory of early medieval history. Number 10. The Viking attack on Lindisfarne. In the summer of AD 793, Viking longships struck the monastery of Lindisfarne, a remote holy island off the coast of Northumbria. The raid shocked the Christian world, and later chroniclers described it as a terrifying sign of divine punishment. Monks were killed, treasures were seized, and the attackers vanished as quickly as they had come. Historians have long wondered why this isolated monastery became the first famous Viking target. One explanation is simple opportunity. Since monasteries were wealthy and largely undefended, they held silver, books, and sacred objects, but had no soldiers to protect them. Early Viking raiders also traveled in small groups, which made lightly defended sites more practical than fortified towns. Some scholars believe the raid may have been symbolic, aimed at a religious center rather than a political one. Even so, the choice of Lindisfarne instead of a richer city remains a puzzle that still invites debate. Number 9. The disappearance of the Anglo-Saxon city of Hamwich. Hammers, located near modern Southampton, was once one of the busiest trading ports in early medieval England. By the 8th century, merchants there dealt in goods from across the North Sea and beyond. Archaeologists have uncovered streets, workshops, and thousands of coins that show how active the settlement once was. Yet by around AD 900, the town had largely been abandoned. There is no clear sign of a single disaster that destroyed it. Instead, historians suggest a mixture of causes. Viking raids increased along the southern coast, making unfortified towns more dangerous. At the same time, King Alfred encouraged the growth of defended towns, drawing people and trade away from exposed settlements. A new walled Southampton developed nearby, while Hamwich gradually declined. Exactly how quickly this process happened and what factor mattered most is still uncertain. Number 8. The Lost Tomb of Alaric the Goth. Alaric, the Visigothic king who sacked Rome in AD 410, died soon after his famous victory. According to later accounts, his followers buried him in a secret tomb beneath the bed of the Busenta River in southern Italy. The story claims the river was diverted, the grave dug, and then the water returned to its course. The workers who knew the location were supposedly killed to protect the secret. For centuries, this tale has inspired treasure hunters and historians alike. Some believe the account may contain a grain of truth, while others see it as legend. Archaeologists have searched the area, but no tomb has ever been found. The supposed treasure taken from Rome also remains missing. Whether the burial was real or symbolic, Alaric's final resting place is still unknown. Number 7. The Sutton Hoo Ship Burial. In 1939, excavations at Sutton Hoo in eastern England revealed a remarkable early medieval ship burial. Inside the outline of the great vessel lay gold ornaments, weapons, silver bowls, and objects from distant lands. The scale of the treasure suggested that the grave belonged to a king or a ruler of great importance. Many historians believe the occupant may have been Raitbold, a powerful king of East Anglia who died in the early 7th century. The dates and location seem to match his reign. However, the acidic soil at the site dissolved any human remains. Without bones, DNA, or inscriptions, the identity of the buried figure cannot be confirmed. Other candidates have been proposed, but none can be proven. As a result, one of England's richest ancient graves still holds a silent mystery. Number 6. The Lost Kingdom of Reged. Reged appears in early Welsh poetry as a powerful British kingdom in the north of Britain. The poems celebrate a ruler named Urien, who fought against the expanding Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in the 6th century. Yet outside these verses, there is little clear evidence of where Reged was located. Some scholars place it in Cumbria, while others point towards southern Scotland. Recent archaeological discoveries at fortified sites have offered new possibilities. One hill fort in Galloway has been suggested as a possible royal centre. Even so, the evidence remains incomplete. By the 7th century, the kingdom disappears from written sources. It may have been absorbed into neighbouring realms or slowly lost its identity. Without clear records, the true story of Reged remains uncertain. Number 5. The Fate of the Picts. The Picts once dominated much of northern and eastern Scotland. Roman writers describe them as fierce warriors beyond the empire's frontier. They left behind carved stones, forts, and mysterious symbols, but very few written records of their own. By the late 9th century, the Picts seemed to vanish from history. The name itself disappears from chronicles, replaced by references to the Scots. Modern historians believe the Picts were not wiped out in a single event. Instead, they were gradually absorbed into a new Gaelic-speaking kingdom. Their rulers merged with those of neighbouring lands, and their language faded away. Over time, their identity blended into the emerging kingdom of Alba. The mystery lies in how such a once powerful people left so little direct trace behind. Number 4. The disappearance of the Norse Greenland settlements. In the late 10th century, Norse settlers led by Eric the Red founded colonies in Greenland. For several centuries, these communities survived in a harsh environment, raising livestock and trading walrus ivory with Europe. Churches were built and farms dotted the fjords. Then, slowly, the settlements began to fade. By the late 15th century, they were completely abandoned. Archaeological evidence suggests no sudden attack or destruction. Instead, the farms appear to have been left in an orderly way. Climate change made agriculture harder and trade routes shifted. The demand for walrus ivory collapsed, cutting off an important source of income. Isolation and harsh winters may have done the rest. The exact sequence of events remains uncertain, and the fate of the last settlers is still unknown. Number 3. The Mystery of St. Brendan's Voyage. St. Brendan was an Irish monk said to have lived in the 6th century. Medieval texts describe his journey across the Atlantic in search of a sacred island. The stories speak of strange creatures, floating islands, and lands beyond the horizon. Some accounts read like spiritual allegories rather than travel logs. Yet in the 1970s, explorer Tim Severin built a leather boat like those described in the tales. He successfully sailed from Ireland to Newfoundland, showing the journey was physically possible. The earliest written versions of Brendan's story date from centuries after his lifetime. That gap makes it difficult to separate fact from legend. Historians still debate whether the voyage was real, symbolic, or a mixture of both. Number 2. the collapse of Roman Britain's cities. When Roman rule ended in Britain around the early 5th century, the landscape began to change. Towns that had once been filled with baths, markets and forums started to empty out. Archaeologists have found evidence of declining urban life across the country. Some places continued on a smaller scale, but many were largely abandoned. The reasons appear to be complex. Without Roman administration, trade networks and coin supplies broke down. Raids and migrations added further instability. Local elites moved into fortified estates rather than remaining in exposed cities. New research suggests economic activity continued for a time before declining more sharply in the later 6th century. The exact causes and the speed of the collapse remain topics of debate. Number 1. The sudden rise of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. By the 6th century, Britain had been transformed by the arrival of Germanic settlers. Small groups of migrants from across the North Sea established new communities. Within a few generations, powerful kingdoms such as Kent, Mercia, and Wessex had emerged. Early writers described violent invasions that wiped out the native population. Modern historians are less certain about this picture. Some evidence suggests the newcomers were relatively few in number. Instead of total conquest, cultural change may have played a major role. Local Britons could have adopted the language and customs of new ruling elites. The collapse of Roman authority also created opportunities for new leaders to rise. The speed of this transformation still puzzles scholars today. Which of these Dark Age mysteries did you find most interesting? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more calm, documentary-style countdowns from ListLab.